Bang ding ding, trademark. He come out 6'7" tall. Bang ding ding, 1 star. Bang dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding. This is a perfect day.
Woke up to the sound of the garbage truck again. Upstairs neighbor's toilet's leaking on my head. And cars broke down, I missed the bus, there runs a 10. I had a feeling this was a day to stay in bed. I finally left my pad right on the jumbo's cloud roof. A police officer pulled out his gun and said, I said, sir, you got the wrong guy. I guess it's just the perfect day. It's just the perfect day. Na, 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 na,
Hey everybody, it's Ryan. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Eggs. This week we have special guest Melvin Figueroa. Melvin is a web designer, branding expert, and the founder of Mello Multimedia. For the past decade, Melvin has been working passionately in the design industry, creating brand identities and building websites for small business owners on both local and national scales. Melvin has always believed that websites should be more than something nice to look at and should serve each individual business in a more dynamic way. By understanding his clients' behaviors, pain points, and benefits of the product and service, Melvin is able to create them a website that will act as a 24/7 salesperson and take their business to the next level. This past year, Melvin has spoken at Goldman Sachs 1000 Small Business Cohort, as well as Rhode Island Black Business Association, about the importance of having strong online presence and how it can make a deep impact on business. So without any further ado, welcome to the show, our guest, Melvin Figueroa.
Hey, Melvin.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, not a problem.
Of course. Happy to have you on. Sorry if I botched the read a little bit. I may go back and fix it. So for everybody,
sounds better the second time.
Yeah. So for everybody who gets the perfect read when this hits the air, they'll know that I went back and fixed it. So anyway, so Melvin, tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's just kind of, I guess, start at the beginning. What got you into web development as a career, and sort of how'd you get started?
Well, that's a good question. Honestly, I actually never thought of myself as an entrepreneur or having a business of my own. But growing up as a kid, I've always been like creative. I've always been somebody who can take something and make it to something else. And I always loved the reaction that I would get from people. And so during high school, yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, you kind of see the dots connecting a little here. But also when I went to like high school, I started taking some classes at RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, and really fell in love with like digital art, and instead of doing it on paper, doing it digitally on a screen. And so from there, I started just transitioning into learning more about the web, learning more of what online graphics really mean, and eventually worked for a couple different print design places, a couple different marketing agencies. Then eventually found out that I don't really like working with the boss. I like being the boss, you know, and I tried it out, and I've been on it ever since.
That's great. Well, what gave you the courage to be able to step out and go on your own? I have sort of a similar backstory just in terms of having self-taught myself a lot of the business and things like that. But for me, it took being laid off from a job, basically. Like, I wasn't brave enough to actually step out and start my business on its own. Now we're 15 years deep, 20 years deep, you know, so it's not that big a deal anymore. But I remember those early days, you know, I was burning the candle at both ends, working my day job and working at night and all these things. And then eventually, like, something had to give, and it was my employer who quit me first. And so I went out and I started my business. So what's your story like?
For me, honestly, like I really believe in like having mentors and having somebody who's further along in the journey than you to learn from. And so every time when I had a job, I treated it like that, basically, as if they were like a mentor and had something to teach me. So I learned and picked up a lot of things from print design, from digital marketing to web design, from all these different jobs and different mentors that I've had. Even when I was in high school and college, I had a lot of internships with that too. And so eventually I started just realizing that, you know, being an entrepreneur, or at least in the web design and creative world, I could do a lot of this stuff on my own. You know, I felt like I didn't need to work a 9 to 5, you know, in order to get that money. Instead, I could have just got my own clients and charge my own rates and make a living that way. Yeah. And so eventually what I would do is I would I would work my 9 to 5, and then just like you, I would work, my side gigs and different projects, and eventually it just grew from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, what's the market like up there? I've only been. Are you in Providence or outside and around Providence?
Yeah, actually, a lot of my clientele is from the Providence area, but I have clients from all over. And I actually recently moved to Florida. Actually, it was in July is when I made the move down here.
July is the wrong time to move there, but right now is the right time to move there. So, I mean, if you're from Rhode Island, now is the time to get out, I think. But
yeah, it's like summer and then like super hot summer. That's all we got here.
That's awesome. Well, cool. So let's talk a little bit then. So, I mean, clearly you identified a niche and that it made sense for you to start doing this work on your own versus doing it for for an employer or a traditional job. Let's talk about your first client. Like, what did it take for you to finally get into your first project? Did it come sort of organically, or was it something you sought out?
Honestly, like I've built a lot of relationships through different jobs, and people know that I'm the guy at the end of the totem pole here, like doing all this stuff. And so people know that. So I have gotten projects that way. But my first project was, I think it was like a family friend or something. It was for like a catering company that somebody was starting, and they needed a logo. And so I went ahead and did that for them. And that was actually like my first like paying client. I actually didn't even charge them. They ended up paying me, like a little like gratuity, a little, nice. Like a little tip or something. And that's really when the spark really, grew from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges. I meet with a lot of young designers and things, and finding new business is one of their biggest issues, and for a lot of creatives, people are generally a little bit introverted or, maybe don't feel or see themselves as like a salesperson. So the fact that you were able to go out and actually position yourself this way and establish relationships early on that would later come back and help you out is a really good indicator, or sort of speaks to your personality.
Yeah, definitely.
Tell us about your first web project, because that's different than just a logo or a quick flyer for a friend kind of thing. That entails scope creep.
Oh yeah, a lot of scope creep. If you don't control it properly. Yeah. But yeah, so like I said, I started with like logo design, and eventually I found myself really liking the online stuff. Creating websites and learning all the principles and psychology, how people interact with the web versus something printed in your hand. And my first web project. I honestly I can't even remember. I've done so many websites. But I want to say the first website that I did was probably my own portfolio site, honestly, just my branding work.
Sure.
That I could remember. I honestly can't even remember my first project, but it was from there. And I'd always test things on my own projects and my own stuff first before trying out on my clients.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think that's how a lot of people get going. Talk a little bit. I mean, this is something we ask a lot. Some people don't want to get into it or not, but do you have any horror stories? Like, do you have that one client that you struggled with the most, and how did you overcome that? I mean, most freelancers and designers and stuff have a few of them, but I'm just curious.
Yeah. I think honestly, when you say like horror stories, I feel like the worst ones are always the ones that have to deal with money. I don't think it gets any scarier than that, really, right? Yeah. And so in the beginning, I really had a lot of like trouble like getting payments on time and all that sort of stuff. And so when I first started, I was actually getting, a lot of people I would design first and then get paid after. And a lot of times when I don't know the person or where they're coming from or how they heard about me, I wouldn't get paid for months. I have to keep chasing them down. And so that was like probably one of the biggest horror stories, is that dealing with is getting paid, And so
I think that's a really important thing to touch on, especially for young designers and people who are just sort of getting their legs, for not just invoicing money, but collecting money. Having that money conversation up front is really key, and most people at least
don't want to do it.
Yeah, don't want to have that conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, was that a problem for you, or did you always feel pretty comfortable asking for money?
I've always been really transparent with all my clients and all my projects that I work on. So for me to talk about money, like I just felt like I was doing them a favor and doing me a favor, you know what I mean? By putting it on the table, like this is how much what you're asking for is going to cost X amount of dollars, it's either you have it or you don't have it. If you don't have it, then we have to kind of adjust so it fits the budget that you guys have in place. So I always felt like, I learned that lesson really quick, and I adjusted pretty quickly too.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know so many people that have been at this for quite a long time who still just struggle with that. I think, to the point you made about sort of that you were actually doing your clients a favor by being transparent and telling them up front what it was going to cost. I think that's one of those things that, because, freelancers, contractors, people like that are generally a little bit timid about money, they don't bring it up until the end. And so when, client shows up, says, hey, I love the work you did, and then they get hit with this fat bill, it kind of comes out of nowhere. And so that creates this contention and makes it difficult for clients to want to pay you. And so I think, not only was it, pretty mature as a young guy to do that, but also, just to have that skill set in place, from the jump is so key.
So
Yeah.
now that you're not doing it, well, you might still be doing quite a lot of logo work, but your focus is mainly on websites, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I treat the logo design and the branding more as like if you absolutely need it, like if I'm designing a website and you have no logo or you have a really bad logo, it doesn't work with the website, then I'll always put that in and kind of say like, hey, we should work on your branding as well. And I go as far as social media, everything that they need to be branded properly.
So what's your initial consult with the client like when you sit down to discuss their needs for a website? What do you normally go through and walk through with the client before you even start? And then is your billing, is that kind of an overall billing, or is it an hourly based thing, or how do you kind of get started with that with them?
Yeah, to answer that question quickly, it's just talking about, I just talk to them really like about the project and the results that the project they're trying to get, and kind of base the pricing off of that. I don't really do like hourly unless it's like something so small, then I might do hourly, or I might just not bill it at all if it's something quick, honestly.
Yeah, sometimes the billing's harder than the actual job.
You do something that takes you like, you do something that takes like 10 minutes and then you want to bill for a whole hour. It just doesn't really make sense,
Yeah.
But so I do like project and value-based kind of fused together. That's kind of how I come up with like pricing for stuff.
Yeah.
And then also what was the first part of the question again? I forgot.
It's just like trying to figure out what your initial consult is like with the client and how you describe the value-based pricing versus the hourly, why they would want to go that route. Because I know a lot of clients are like, okay, $100 an hour, 50 hours, whatever the total is kind of thing. It makes sense to them versus the value-based pricing, which is Chris Do's kind of mantra, right?
Yeah.
And you've kind of adopted that now, right?
Well, yeah, and actually one of the stars in the value-based pricing movement is right there in Providence. So, I mean, now you've moved away, but he was nearby. This guy, Jonathan Stark, he's one of the guys that sort of leads that charge, but he's right there in Providence. So.
Yeah, I've heard of Chris Do. I watch a lot of his content on YouTube. He actually did kind of introduce to me a little bit of like the value-based pricing, and also there's like a book, Win Without Pitching Manifesto, that he talks about all the time. Yeah. I've read that book. That book has transformed my business completely. From how I think about what I do.
Yeah. For people who don't know it, it's basically, it's a pretty quick little read. It's, maybe less than 100 pages. It's not a real long book, but it's basically 12 keys to running your business as a creative freelancer or as a contract worker. And it's simple, but it's brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. I'd agree.
Yeah, and that one's by a guy named Blair Enns, if anybody wants to look him up.
I'll have to check that out.
So, so that's great. But yeah, like I say, I've been in business for a long time, but we've just started to try and make the transition into a value-based pricing model from doing hourly for a decade. And, it's been a tough process, but it's totally worth doing. Chris Do has been on this podcast. He was one of our guys, and actually I may see him this weekend. But he sort of has helped, get me on track to do that value-based pricing, and just sort of changes the way that you deal with clients. I think it's really good information, and I just wish I'd have come up, landed on that kind of stuff 15 years ago before I did it the hard way for all this time.
Yeah, I agree. Also, too, with like time-based, like billing through like hours and all that stuff, like I feel like it's all about like how fast can you get it done, so I can get the best price on it. And so when you take away that dynamic of the conversation and it's about, all right, what are the results, then it changes the whole relationship, the whole project overall, and you get the better end product. Yeah,
it's so true. And as a freelancer, as somebody who's working by the hour, it doesn't behoove you to work very, quickly. Obviously you're going to make more money if you can kind of drag your feet, so why be fast? Why be good? So it sort of de-incentivizes, designers and people like that. So I think it's a really good model to step away from. I also think, honestly, clients appreciate it. The way we do it, we give sort of a flat package rate, so it's going to be this amount of money, period. There's no wishy-washy. There's no maybe we go over. This is what it costs.
Yeah, exactly, same here.
And then, we are also trying to, and it sounds like, and this might be a good segue into some of these other questions that we've got for you, but we tend to base things on some sort of measurable business metric. And it's funny because that seems like a very common idea, like for business people. But for creative people, most people are creative first, business people second, third, fourth, fifth. And so they often don't even really think about that. They just go, oh, well, what looks great? Or what do I think would communicate this in a good way based on my artistic experience? But it's, generally pretty tough to come up with an ROI against somebody's gut feeling. And so doing this project-based pricing, the way that we're talking about, and actually setting it up against some sort of measurable business metric is something that, at least in my experience, our clients are appreciating because now they can actually see, their money's going, they got more business, cool, it worked. Now we actually can measure it and say, versus in the past when we would just do a website because somebody came to us and said they needed one.
Yeah, or even worse too, like sometimes the client will drive everything that goes on the website and there's no consideration at all to a strategy or a goal to the website.
Or just
nothing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, it's one of these things that it's like, it's in the ether that everyone should have a website, therefore I must have one. But they don't actually even think about what they're supposed to do with it. So I guess maybe on that topic, why don't we get into some of these questions? So the first thing I wanted to ask is sort of why should the digital landscape be a part of a company's marketing plan? I think the idea here is that, you need to have a broader idea of what's happening in technology and what's happening in the market before you actually go forward. This is, back to what we were just saying about people not actually planning or thinking ahead. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, 2019, if you're not online, then you're not even a part of the conversation. You're not even in the same room as the people having the conversation. And so I think that's like the simple answer to that.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I think that's the thing. I mean, obviously being online is key and, but like, I don't know if it's as bad now, but there was a little window there where, every 26-year-old that knew how to run Twitter became a social media expert. And they would run out and they'd convince these companies that they had to have it. And it's not that maybe you shouldn't be on social media. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of arguments for why you should be on social media. But I do think it's interesting, just like you were saying about websites, a lot of people don't know why. They're just going there because, oh, well, it's free to be on Twitter, so I guess I should be on Twitter. And so do you have any thoughts on that in terms of like the, just in the overarching landscape or digital landscape, choosing a channel or choosing a platform? Like what kind of motivators would you encourage in your clients to try and pick a channel?
Well, the first thing is like the reason why the website comes into play with all that is because I like to think of the website as a plate, and everything that you do, every digital marketing service that you do for your business is an item, or peas or mashed potatoes or whatever you want on your plate, right? So the website is really the plate, and without the plate, you're not really having any. You're gonna look like a crazy person with all this food in your hands rather than a plate. And so like people pay for like LinkedIn ads or Facebook ads and all this stuff, but people at the end of the day, they're going to go back to your website and look at your website. And so I feel like you're cutting your results a lot shorter when you don't have a website in place, when you do all these other digital marketing tactics, but then the website is just, lackluster for a better.
Well, and that's the thing too. I mean, back to having an overarching strategy or having some understanding of why you're actually creating a website. I mean, typically you're using social media to engage people and hopefully drive them to somewhere anyway.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you kind of have to have somewhere, so in to use your metaphor, if they don't have this dish to land on, then where are they going to go? They're just going to go float out in the ether somewhere, in which case, I mean,
customers.
Yeah. So, I think that's a good point.
So, do you dabble with the SEO at all, or is that kind of not your specialty? You're just in the design world.
SEO, I don't really dabble much into it. I have partners that I work with that have specialties in different things, and SEO is one of them. And so, but I'm able to do the basics, like meta tags, title tag, page stuff, page titles and all that stuff. Sure. The basics of it, just to get like what Google needs at the bare minimum, But in terms of SEO, that's a different tactic that I would partner with somebody else on.
Sure.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So what do you think are 3 small details of a website that can make a big impact on a potential client? Most people, I mean, obviously strategy is one of these big ones, but what are the little things that people don't think of that might help make their website perform a little better?
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff, but one thing is having like a lot of social proof on your website. And what that basically means is having other like case studies or video testimonials or written testimonials on the website. just because all the people, we're social creatures, you know what I mean? We get persuaded off of emotion most of the time when it comes to like buying a product. We believe we're being a part of a tribe or a culture when we buy a product. You know, when we buy like AirPods, we're getting inducted into that Apple environment, right? That culture that Apple has. And so the same thing, you know, when it comes with social proof, you want to feel good about the purchase that you made. And so that's something that I would definitely make sure to have on a website, and can really make a website perform a lot better. Just having that's one thing. Also, another thing too is having the website be light enough where it can load on a mobile device. That's another thing. These are not like any particular order or anything.
Sure. No, I think it's all good advice. I mean, especially for people who are totally unschooled and you know, might be coming to this, you know, as we mentioned before we got on air, a lot of the people who listen to this show are entrepreneurs or small business owners, people like that, people who are looking to do as much as they can on their own. Generally, you know, they're trying to bootstrap and figure out how to do things on as small a budget as they can. So they may want to try and do a few things themselves, you know. So I think this kind of thing is great. So if you've got maybe a couple more you'd be willing to share, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, you know, like I was saying, make the website basically light enough where it can load properly on any device, on a mobile device. Because you got to think about it, your phone, you know, you're using a data versus connected to a Wi-Fi. So it's not going to be as fast. So you want to make sure that even somebody that's not connected to Wi-Fi can the website load on. Also, on top of it, you know, loading fast on mobile is the way that your website looks on mobile. You know, are the buttons big enough? Are they clickable? Is the text too small? Is it too big?
Does
those sort of things
accordingly? Does it
exactly?
You know, because if you're looking at a whole page that's like designed for a monitor versus your small iPhone, if it doesn't scale accordingly, it's hard to navigate and get around. Sometimes you can't even navigate and get around.
Yeah, like some certain things are blocked. You can't get to it. You know, so many issues sometimes.
Your image sizes are another thing. If you have full high def images and it takes forever to load, that drops down on your SEO results as well. Mm-hmm. So why would someone want to come to someone like you versus try and do it themselves?
I think one of the main things is just that I'm agile, you know, that I'm able to be very flexible and work with the customer versus like big corporate companies where you got to go through multiple different channels, multiple different things. Like with me, when you call me or when you email me or when you get in contact with a project for me to work on with you, you're getting me, and I'm able to just move fluidly, like with whatever the customer needs.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. Well, and I don't know, maybe you can get a little bit more into this, but what do you think are the factors that might, like, I guess, if I'm a small business owner and I'm trying to make the decision whether I continue going it on my own or if I wanted to engage somebody like you to do the work, you know, do you have any idea of some of the kinds of factors or things that people are weighing before they go in? I mean, I would guess cost is one, but I mean, can you speak to any of the sorts of things that, you know, might be indicators that it's time to engage a professional?
I think the biggest thing is just the like I mentioned before, the behaviors of how people use the internet. So when I work on a project, the best projects are the ones that I collaborate directly with the business owner himself, because nobody knows your business better than you. And so I feel like when you merge the business owner's expertise about their industry or their business and how it runs with the mind of a person like myself that knows like the psychology and the behaviors of how people use the internet and how to build websites effectively to get your point across, and also to get, you know, boost sales and actually get results, it creates like a perfect medley there.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I mean, I know I deal with people all the time who are either premature, so they're coming to me without a plan, without a strategy. They don't even know why they need a website. Or you get people who've maybe toughed it out too long. So I think it's really important to kind of identify when is the right time to pull the trigger.
I think time, honestly, is the biggest indicator. Like if you just literally don't have the time, you know, you going out, you're managing relationships, you're managing customers, and then on top of that, you're managing a website and branding and all that stuff. Like I feel like that's the biggest indicator is just time, when you don't have the time to do that stuff, or you rather just work on the business rather than in it, you know?
Yeah. Do you do hosting for them, or do you just say, hey, I'll do the design and you guys are responsible for the hosting and the name servers and the domain management and all that stuff?
I take care of everything. When I do websites, I do like maintenance plans after once it's live and launched. And so basically, like if you have any issue with the website or you want to make updates to the website, I do that pretty much within 1 or 2 business days. I'm pretty quick about that. But also we go as far as pretty much anything technical. So it includes the hosting as well, setting up the hosting, setting up emails, pretty much anything that has to do with that. And then also when it comes to the branding portion, I can also print marketing collateral too. So it's really a all, one and done type of thing. I try to have as much services for the customer so they don't have to go out and shop around too much. They just go to me for everything that they would need, and it gets done.
Nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's take a step back. You mentioned earlier that sometimes you have companies come to you that don't have, branding or logos or anything in place, by the time they come to you, let alone a web strategy or some understanding why they need to be online. But can you talk about why branding and logo design is so important for a small business or a startup? I know, at least in my experience here in Salt Lake, we work with a lot of startups and things like that. And, a lot of these tech guys, they don't put any thought to the branding. Really that comes later. At first they're trying to build technology, and then they're trying to get money, and they're trying to do this and that. But sometimes the branding or the logo design is sort of given short shrift. So can you talk about why that's such an important component of a business?
I think it's pretty simple. Like, one of the main reasons branding is important is because if you're inconsistent with your branding, you lose trust psychologically from customers. Like, if you go to like a restaurant and they have like a little like paper sign on the door, or they have like a little like raggedy little menu or something they just printed off the copy machine,
then it's going to be legit.
That works with Mexican food, I think.
Yeah. Well, it depends, right, where you're at. For the most part.
Sorry.
For the most part, no worries. For the most part, when you see that type of stuff, it throws the customer off. And so by being branded, it makes you gain trust as the easiest way possible with your customers, just by looking a certain way, looking clean and polished.
Well, even just a color palette, like if you have the 4 colors that are the business identity, and you stick to that, that's your brand guidelines. That's your stuff that most people would kind of overlook.
And that's the thing. I think to your point, this, basically it's consistency. You don't see Nike has just been running out with this swoosh thing all these years, but tomorrow they're going to just start using triangles or something. It wouldn't make sense. Like, that'd be a break in the consumer confidence and in the trust of the brand, because we've become accustomed to it. So I think that's a really good point. Do you think, or have you noticed that, sort of as technology's improved, everybody's got a cousin that knows Photoshop nowadays. Like, there are a lot of people, like, there's almost no excuse to not have a brand of some variety anymore. And I wonder if, because it's so much more accessible now, that it's leading to sort of bad branding. So, like, yes, you have a logo, yes, you have stuff, but you're not being intentional. You're not thinking of the way the audience is perceiving you. You don't have, like, for example, like Mike said, a color palette or something. It's figured out. So, like, how do you tell good from bad, I guess? So if I go and trust my cousin to build me out a logo, how do I know that it's good or bad?
Yeah, so I think a good logo is just a logo that's simple, it's unique, and it's memorable. That's really how you would know. Because a good logo should speak for your company when you're not there. So when you see it on a bag, or you see it on a notebook, or you see it just anywhere, the audience that it's intended for should be able to see that logo and know what the company's about before they even say anything, before they even go to the website. And so I feel like that's really what makes a good logo. But also too, having it, like you mentioned, like the palette, the color palette, the typography, having a whole entire branding kit created for that, so it doesn't move from the original design that was created for the company. Because sometimes you get a logo done and then you'll see something else that the boss or the owner just wanted to make on his own. It doesn't even look like the company at all, and so I feel like that's what makes it good.
Yeah, and it's funny too. Like, I'm working with several clients even now that are pretty mature companies, and even for these more mature companies, they still a couple of them anyway don't have brand guidelines and things like that. And it seems like such a no-brainer, but for whatever reason, it doesn't occur to people that you really need to define all this stuff. Yeah,
especially when you hand off the assets for like the branding to other people. That's when it's super key, because then they know what to do with it. They know what fonts to get. They know what colors to use. But when you don't have that, that's when all that inconsistency starts happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense. So I guess, so sort of to that end, we talked about a bad brand, but can you talk about what a bad website is and how business owners can avoid having one?
Don't hire me to do it. That's
I think what makes a bad website really is just a website that isn't clear. There's all these different things distracting them to do a million and one different actions. For example, like a call to action should be one call to action on what's the main primary objective that you want the user to do on the website, whether that's an email list or whether it's to simplify customer service or to get in contact with that business. The call to action should be very simple. But so if it's overcrowded, it's just a bad website. If it isn't branded with the branding or anything like that, or no logo, just a random color palette for the website, that also is a bad website. If it doesn't load fast, it's a bad website. If it just focuses on the business and what they've done, I think that's a bad website. A good website will always focus on their customers, their pain points, and also like the benefits of using the product rather than just the features of the product. Because features is just talking about the materials and how this is made in 30 years in business and all that sort of stuff. But the benefits is like, what do I get as the customer from using your product or service, And I feel like a lot of business owners miss that mark with their website.
Yeah, it's true. I think it's really easy for companies to become a little bit, self-centered or start looking at their needs. Yeah, because they know that what they have is the best thing ever. So I mean, here we don't necessarily need to focus the message to somebody else. Just,
it's also hard to take that step outside of you and look into the business as the customer would, and hiring someone that isn't part of the business, someone like you, that can take that objectively and then go from there versus I'm the CEO and I'm trying to build a website. I'm going to,
Exactly.
Yeah, my nephew's going to build it and we're just going to do it.
Yep.
So, that's for sure. So let's transition a little bit. I guess, first of all, so it's not really a full-blown role play, but I want to kind of go through this journey a little bit just so that people understand what they can expect when they try and engage somebody like you. So first, if I'm Joe Consumer and I've got my own little small business and I'm looking to engage somebody, like you said, I'm out of time. I can't keep spending resources on this stuff. My days just aren't long enough. So what qualifications should I look for in a web developer or a web design company?
I think honestly, you should just look at their case studies, or even if they don't have like formalized like case studies, just ask about like the past 3 projects or past 5 projects that they worked on and what results and how that project went and that sort of stuff. Before you start working on my project, I would look at projects that you've done for other people. That's what I would look for in a web developer. And
how if you don't know anything about the technology, is there any clear way to understand whether somebody is a proficient programmer or proficient developer outside of maybe just the aesthetics? Maybe you're a great designer, but you can't build a website.
Yeah, because there is a disconnect there. Someone can be a great designer, but not know, outside of WordPress, how would you develop a custom solution for the client that if you can't find a plugin in WordPress or something to that extent? How can they kind of figure out that you have what they need?
Yeah, I personally, when I talk to customers, I never really focus on the technology. Like they might mention something like, oh, are you going to be building it on WordPress? I'll say, yeah. Or if they don't want it on WordPress, then we do it that way as well. But more of the conversation like of showing past results is like the results themselves. That's what the conversation's all about. Like the fact that this customer wanted this result, did you achieve it or not with the past web design project that you worked on? And so it's always about results. It's not really, I don't talk much about technology wise, unless it's like when the website's done and they want to be able to manage the website on themselves. I'll do a little bit of training on how to manage the back end. That's like as far as it goes for the most part.
Well, and I think, now that you say that, I think that's a really good point, because I think if you get too caught up in the technical side, people maybe start to kind of glaze over and, they don't stick with you because they don't understand the conversation at all. They're just coming to you as a trusted provider to deliver. They don't really care how you do it, just do it.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was trying to say.
Cool.
That makes sense.
Okay, so let's say then I'm back to being Joe Consumer, and I've got my little small business. I've decided to engage you. I like your case studies. I like the work you're doing for other people, and it makes sense to me that you could do a good job for me. What's that process look like from when I initially engage with you through discovery, design, all these different components? Can you talk a little bit about just the process of employing? It can be your process or just the process of sort of working with a professional in this space.
Yeah, we schedule like an appointment basically for me just to understand their business and understand the problems and why they think they need a website. because you'll come to find this as well, like where a lot of people think they have all these problems, but really it's a lot deeper, bigger issues, and so that's what the first conversation is always about. It's about that. And then also at the same time, I'm interviewing them as well to see if it's a good fit for me to work with them as well.
That's smart.
So it's kind of, it's both ways because sometimes some clients just don't end up working well for whatever reason. And usually that's the cutting point where it'll happen. But if I see that it's been a good match, good conversation, it's a problem that I can actually help with, we'll move on to like the next step, which is contract, invoicing, all that stuff. And then we get into the strategy and understanding deeper from a company level. What are the strategies that they have? What are the weaknesses that they have currently, and how can the website strengthen those weaknesses? And also understanding internally, how do they intake customers? Do they have a call center? Do they have different things so that the website can go hand in hand and hand off the potential leads to the call center or whatever system that they have internally for how they handle customers?
That makes sense. Do you use a CRM or what software do you use for invoicing and payment?
Honestly, I've been using the same stuff since 2010, which is I've just been using PayPal just because it has everything that I need in it, recurring invoices, sending out branded invoices, all that stuff. And the percentage is about the same anyways, what they take. So I just ended up using that, and I still am.
That works.
Yeah, nothing wrong with PayPal. I love it. Can you talk about, you mentioned one thing in that sort of little rundown that I think is key, and I think it's something that a lot of younger designers and people like that may not, and even if you're honestly not even a designer, but you are in a service business or you're working with clients, it makes sense to approach things this way. The word that you used that I keyed in on was interviewing. You're interviewing your clients. I think a lot of people, especially when they're young and they're hungry and they're just, they got to make some money, they have this proclivity to just take on a client regardless. It doesn't matter who they are, what they are, or even if it looks like it might be a little bad, we're still desperate enough to take that money. Can you talk a little bit about how you transitioned or how you got comfortable getting to a stage where you had enough confidence to actually sit down and interview your clients and be willing to tell somebody no?
Yeah, I always position myself that way. Like every time when I get like a somebody who fills out the contact form or something, I always word it in a very specific way. Like, let's see if this is going to be a good fit. So number one, right off there is an indicator saying that I just don't take every single project that comes my way. But also the way that I just word it is, that we're trying to figure out if this is going to work, because in the beginning I used to take a lot, like every project that would come my way, because I did truly need the money at that time. And even now I still need the money. Right. Yeah. So like I just realized that by me taking these lower paying jobs or these jobs that I just didn't feel comfortable taking, I'm losing an opportunity to work with customers that have bigger budgets or actually are pleasant to work with. Sometimes you'll find that some customers, like especially entrepreneurial people in general, sometimes can be a little bit aggressive, or that alpha male persona sometimes, and certain things just don't mesh up well, you know what I mean, for whatever reason. And so it's an interview both ways, and I just, I want to make sure that I can deliver on the results that we discuss.
Well, yeah, it's funny because with almost 100%, certainty, like almost every person I know that has taken the approach you're describing, where you're actually interviewing your clients, you're being somewhat exclusive, you're willing to tell somebody no. Everybody I know that's been brave enough to take that step in their career has always ended up better for it. You stop doing the $20 an hour work and you move up to the $50 an hour work, and you sort of work your way through a career. I think a little bit of it, I almost feel like you have to have, burned the midnight oil and gone through the struggles of an early career to understand that transition. Yeah. But I think the sooner you can get like this particular point, or this point in particular, this idea that you should be exclusive and that you don't need to work for everybody, especially if you don't like them or if there's some other red flag that you don't like. You absolutely should be able to tell somebody no. And I think that, the sooner you can get to that in a career, the better off you are.
Yeah, it's hard to sit back and realize that, not every client's the client or worth even pursuing, because sometimes that X amount of dollar check isn't worth the effort that you have to put into it. And we've all been down there, and we've all had those clients where you're 3/4 of the way along and you're pulling your hair out, and you just can't wait till the delivery date just to get it out and not have to deal with it anymore. Never get another email from them again and be like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
So we've
just
been
get
there.
up and go.
Well, and like you mentioned earlier on, and I think actually Mike brought it up, was this idea of scope creep. I think that, for people who don't know, basically this is the idea of, the project you bidding, sort of starting to exceed the bounds of what you quoted. And it's really common. It happens a ton in marketing and advertising. I assume it happens in other businesses like general contracting. I mean, if you're building a house, I imagine that it's really easy for the scope to creep a little bit if you're not disciplined.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important that, this interviewing process is one aspect of that I think can contribute or sort of help rein in some scope creep, because you have a good relationship. You have somebody you can talk to open and honestly. You've been transparent from the beginning. And I think ultimately that leads to a better relationship. Those people are a little less likely to screw you over, I think.
Yeah, and the other thing too, you kind of mentioned a little bit too, is like it is a relationship, I'm very transparent with all my clients. Like if I advise them on a lot of different things when it comes to like the website, what they should do, what they shouldn't do, and because I treat it such like a relationship that like I don't want to just take every single project, even ones that didn't mesh well, and then not be able to really care for them the way that they should be, just because for some reason it just didn't work out. But with customers, like, I'm in it for the long term. When I build a website, I want to be treated like that in-house guy, that's like your in-house design team in a way, so we really become almost like a family in a way.
Yeah, no, I love that perspective. I mean, especially this idea of looking sort of at the long term. I think back to our example of the young designer or the young, service contractor, or whatever we want to call them, so we can be inclusive of everyone. But the young designers who are taking on clients that they don't like, most of them are thinking very short term. They're thinking, hey, I've just got a product. They have cash. I can do the job. Let's just knock it out and be finished. And they're not really thinking, further down the line into the sort of long form relationship space that, that you're describing. And I think that, ultimately, I mean, that's something we realized in our business early on, is this idea of developing good quality relationships is much more valuable than, on both the financial and the sort of personal fronts. It's much more valuable to have clients that you love and that you're sort of familial with versus a bunch of short-term gigs that are just in and out and gone and don't care.
Don't remember you the next week.
Yeah.
Well, and ultimately, it doesn't behoove you as a contract person. If somebody employs your agency and the experience they had with you was so quick and short and dirty that that doesn't help get you referrals. That doesn't help get you, your name spread positively. It doesn't actually do you any good to go do kind of a crappy job for somebody or kind of bust through something fast just because.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think most people, especially young people, don't realize that, because they don't have these problems until later when they've been in their career for 15 years, yet nobody is talking about them.
Yeah, or you build like a whole portfolio of like clients that you don't like working with, and then you gotta keep on working with them just to pay the bills. You know?
It's true. It's almost. I mean, it's one of these things that I'm always telling my kids. If you believe you can, or if you believe you can't, you're right. It's sort of this magnetism, right? It's this idea that if you work with bad clients perpetually and you become known as the guy that works with this type of client, well, then you're going to attract more of that type of client. You really need to be setting goals and aspirations to try and win business from people you actually want to work with, whether it's on a philosophical level or a, whatever bit of that person's business or that company that you admire. You need to sort of actually think about that and try and be a little bit more lofty in your goals instead of just taking every scrub that comes by.
Was it Ben Burns that fired his whole clients? Everyone Chris.
Yeah. I think I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. We were joking. Well, what'd you do? Just send a mass email and say peace. We're done. But I mean, sometimes that is kind of a necessity. Like if you're getting the $20 an hour clients and you're looking for the $100 an hour clients, they're not going to be associating with those people. If you keep taking them on, they're not going to refer you to the better paying clients, the clients that you actually want.
That's so true.
Yeah. But anyways,
and I think there's the aspect of that too. I mean, whether it comes to such a dire moment or such a desperate moment as Ben described, where he, basically had to fire all his clients, or if you're just a young person or a young designer or a young company trying to come up, I mean, if you want the Pepsis of the world, Pepsis don't hire $25 an hour agencies. They just don't. I mean, they're hiring expensive shops with big brands and big reputations and things like that. Like, if you want to work for the big guys, then you have to grow and become a big guy, And so if you spend too much time with bad clients and not working on your business practices and developing, good clientele and good rapport and, developing those relationships, those ever important relationships, then when you do want to do work for the Pepsis or whomever, you're not ready. I should probably stop saying Pepsi because I'm drinking Fresca. Fresca's a Coke
I bet
product.
you they're owned by the same.
No, this is a Coke product.
Oh, crap.
We're on the good side. So when I said Pepsi, bleep that out. Call it Coke. So anyway, well, so let's talk a little bit. I mean, these are sort of some top level things. But can you give us just a couple reasons or purposes that somebody might need a website or might want one? I mean, we addressed the idea that, it's 2019, like, get with it already.
Yeah.
But outside of that, like, why would I actually want a website? What are the things I can do with one these days?
I think, honestly, the reason why you want a website is because it can equal more money in your pocket as a business owner. People, they're going to check you out online. They're going to look at reviews about your business. You're going to be, whether you have a website or not, people are going to look for you online. And it's either you're going to be online to defend your case or not.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way of putting it. Because, that's the thing, right? I mean, either you can have your own website so people can come straight to the horse's mouth, or they're going to hear about you from other channels. And so, but either way, you're online.
What's the benefits of having your own site versus like a Facebook page or a Squarespace site or something to that extent? Why would you want to have your own?
Yeah, I've seen that a few times where people just point a domain name to like a Facebook page. But the thing is, like, that's super templated. People always talk about templates are bad. That's like the mega template right there, And also too, like, if Facebook goes away, guess what? Your website goes away, you know? But I think those templated, like Squarespace and Wix and all these different guys that are out there, I think you're just not getting the strategy. You're saving tons and tons of money by doing the website yourself, but I think you're not, you're probably going to focus on yourself as a business and not think about your customers and not portray that on your website. Just overall strategy of like getting the person who goes on your website to do something so that they can reach out to you so you can carry the conversation from there, thus, creating a sale or a lead or something from there. And continue the relationship from that point on. But if you don't have a website, that can't happen. Yeah,
I think the kind of the point you're making is this idea that, it's not that they're hiring you necessarily. I mean, tactically, you're building a website, but strategically, you're offering so much more than just a website. And this kind of goes back to our value-based proposition and our idea of sort of billing project versus hourly. But it's sort of this concept that, you're actually, the value that you bring isn't even actually that you can build the website. Like, that tactical execution is like, it's great. Like, that's the frosting on the cake, or that's the end of this discussion. But all this strategy and all this planning that comes in, ahead of time is actually what you're buying. You're buying our experience, you're buying our brains, you're buying our thought processes, those sorts of things that can actually make the thing you execute work.
Yeah, even when you hire a web designer, like, there's millions, thousands of web designers out there, right? But really what makes a good web designer from, a bad one is, the strategy. I think strategy is even more important than design itself, in all honesty, because without the strategy, you can't even design around anything.
Yeah, and it's funny, for a long time, just sort of as a lifelong designer, like that was really a lesson that took me a long time to learn. Right. I mean, when you're working in an art department, or you're working, surrounded by a bunch of other designers and stuff all the time, you start to get this idea that, well, what you're creating is the most important thing, right? I mean, it's the thing that people are seeing. And the example I always use is I once worked for an agency, and we did a big website project for a global health or vision insurance company. And, this huge project, huge company, huge budgets, all this stuff, right? And for this one little tiny component of their website, we had like this $11 million budget. And I was like, oh, wow, this is awesome. Like, we're making all this money, we're doing this stuff. And, and me and all the designers, we're cranking and we're building all these awesome designs and all this stuff, and sparing no expense. We're doing focus groups. We've got like rooms set up with cameras over people so we can see how they behave. This was
full A/B test.
Yeah, this was years ago. So we had to do it a little Stone Age back then. So, but we'd actually watch people and then change our prototype, based on how they were moving and stuff like that. We spared no expense. At the end of the day, we had billed about $300,000 $375,000 for the website and the creative work. The other $11.7 million or $10.7 million went to the strategists and the planners who had actually put together all the plan that we were executing.
Yeah.
And so it's funny when you think about it that way, because as a designer, our inclination, and even as a web developer, if you're not thinking strategically, we tend to think that what we're doing is the most important piece of the business. But to your point, the strategy or the planning behind it is actually the much more lucrative, much better, and much more important part. Now granted, the strategy doesn't work if you don't have a nice execution. So, I guess it's maybe a chicken or the egg kind of discussion that you could have depending on who you're talking to.
Well, but who did we have on? We had an SEO expert on probably 6 months ago who had a client that he changed the layout of the button and put it in a different order, and their sales increased by 30% or something. I can't remember his name, but
that sounds pretty accurate.
Yeah, just like repositioning the button and getting rid of a few other things, they were able to increase the sales on the overall product by like 30 or 35% just by doing one simple thing. And it's amazing how just a psychological change like that can drive people through the actual process. So it's strategic planning is key. Strategery. But
even the colors too make a big difference. I've heard that if you make like the call to action button orange, I forgot what the percentage is, but it's a big number. It goes up for people actually clicking it because it pops so much from
they can see it versus blending in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny. So to I guess sort of put a cap on the point you were making about sort of that we're buying the strategy and we're buying the experience, or your consumer is, versus actually buying the tactical execution, which is how you get away without talking about the technology. Yeah. Is that most people, like if you're building your own Wix website or you're building whatever, you could maybe do some research if you were really invested and figure out, some color theory and some other things like that. But generally, you can just kick a guy like Melvin a couple bucks, and this is the experience you get that helps guide some of these decisions. Because, yes, he can build a website, but what you're actually buying is this knowledge, this background knowledge.
Yeah, and also just collaborating and really picking the owner's brain and fusing that with, like, again, the behaviors of people online, and really putting the customer, their customer first, because that's really who makes or breaks the website, right, is the customer. Is it working for them?
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about, so as you're talking about picking the brains of your employee or your employer or the boss or whomever is the sort of stakeholder in this website, can you talk to the idea of sort of getting down to the bottom of what it is they actually are doing there? You mentioned at the top of the show this idea that sometimes what they think is their problem isn't really their problem. Like it's actually something much deeper or something totally different. Have you had any experience like that you could sort of talk about or maybe sort of give some hints to, how to interface with a customer or a client and try and actually drive down to this why or figure out what their purpose is?
Yeah. A lot of the most common one that I get a lot is somebody will be stuck on like a Wix website or something or a Squarespace and they can't like scale the website, and so they'll say, yeah, can you log into our Squarespace and do this and do that? And then when I'm looking at it, I'm like, there's no way you can't. What the real problem is that you want a website that'll grow with your company. You did this when you guys were a small company and it worked then. And so that's like an example that I get a lot is that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, yeah, cool. Go ahead, Mike.
We're almost to that point. Do you want to tell people where they can find you and any parting shots that you have before we get out of here?
So if you are interested in working with me or you need a consultation of any kind, you can reach me at www.mellomultimedia.com, and Mello spelled MELLO, multimedia.com.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you said now you're in Florida, but you, do you still have family in Rhode Island? Do you get back, or is Florida the new HQ?
Florida's the new HQ, definitely. It's a permanent move. But I work with clients all over. I just finished doing an author's website based out of California. He referred me to a cover band that needs a website also in California. So I'm all over the place.
That's awesome. Cool. So, and then I also see here that you've got a YouTube channel. What kind of stuff do you do over there?
Yeah, my YouTube channel and also my LinkedIn too. I put like a lot of like valuable tips on there. I try to make it quick, like videos that are like under 2 minutes, just little tips and tricks that business owners can do to improve like their website or their branding or stuff related to business, and messaging towards their audience.
Yeah, that's awesome. So go check it out. It's youtube.com/Mello Media, Mello Multimedia, MELLO Multimedia. And like he also mentioned, it's mellomedia. Good Lord, man.
Get it together,
You know what?
right?
mellomultimedia.com. No W on Mello. So,
all right, well, cool.
All right, well, thanks so much, Melvin. We really appreciate your time, and I think the types of things that we talked about today, I think will be really valuable for our audience. So thanks for taking the time, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Of course. Take care. Thanks to everybody who tuned in for the live stream. We are always on the hunt for more feedback from the community. So let us know what you thought of Melvin and, I guess of our performance, although keep it to Melvin mostly. And, but anyway, questions, comments, anything you've got, send them in and let us know. For people who didn't get to our show through our website, it's eggscast.com. You can also just shoot us an email, info@eggscast.com, or go to the contact form on the site. So I guess that's it.
Sweet.
So thanks so much again. Once again, Melvin Figueroa, Mello Multimedia is our guest, and we'll see you next time.